All right, guys, what is up? Welcome back to the channel. All the stuff for the 85 forks are done. So I'm gonna throw my phone up on the tripod and show you guys how to rebuild these forks. Things here for the 85 forks. One thing I highly recommend you having is the HP fork oil measure. This is gonna make your life so much easier when trying to measure the oil gap. But other than that, we just got our seals and our fork oil, so let's get right to it. All right, so the first tool you're gonna need is an 18mm socket. You're also gonna need a flathead screwdriver. You're gonna need to take that rebound clicker all the way out on both the top and the bottom. Then once you do that, you can just take your 18mm socket, loosen that all the way out. Once you get that loosened, just loosen it by hand. And then just slide that down. Now you want to drain all the oil, which we already did prior to this, so there's no oil in there. But yeah, that is how you do that. So now what we have to do is we have to compress this spring and get to that lock nut right there and loosen that up. So I'm gonna grab a wrench and do that right now. So you're gonna need a 14mm wrench to get to this lock nut. And then what you do is you just compress the spring, and then you get on there with your wrench and loosen that up a little bit. And once you have it loosened enough, you can just loosen this cap off and then just spin that off. Then you can get your spring out. And once we have our spring off, what we can do is take the spring out, and then we can pop these tubes apart and get the new seals on. So there's that. Just pull the whole entire rod out, set it on a clean surface, and then just pull your spring out as well. Okay, so to pop these tubes apart, you have to take the dust seal and this little circlip off, and then you can just, all right, so we got the fork tubes apart. Bushings don't look too bad. But yeah, to get these fork tubes apart, once you get the dust seal and the little circlip off, you just have to pull them apart like that. But yeah, so now I'm gonna take these bushings off. I don't have new bushings, so we're just gonna carefully take them off so they don't bend, and then we're gonna get the new seals on. Okay, so we got all the seals off, wiped it down. Now what we do need to do is get saran wrap or a plastic bag and just put it over this so we don't scuff or cut the new seals. So yeah, we're gonna put that on there, and then we can just slide the new seals on. And before we put everything back together, we're just gonna wipe everything down. Probably take a towel and just push through there to make sure we get all the nasty old oil out of there. All right, so we got both of the seals on, so now you just put this little ring on, and then you have your first bushing, and then you have your big bushing that goes into that little groove right there. You wanna be really careful not to bend that. You wanna get it on straight, and then it should look just like that when you get that on. So now we're gonna put the fork tube back on, that just slides on, and then I'm going to show you here in a little bit how to make a makeshift seal driver. So we got a roll of electrical tape, and what you're going to do is you're just going to start unrolling it on the fork. You want it to be as straight as possible so it drives in the fork nice and straight. So just try to get that on as straight as possible. And you're just gonna wrap that until you have a big enough lip that it can catch that seal and drive it up in there. So just do that. Just don't make it too wide that it hits on the side of your fork tube. All right, so we got the seal in there. We just used the duct tape method, and literally that's all you do. You just beat that in there like that. So now what we're gonna do is take the duct tape off, and then we can just use this to drive in the dust seal. All right, so what you wanna do is just push the seal up there by hand, and then you're just gonna take your the bottom of your fork and just go like that. And after a few hits, your seal should be completely seated. All right, so now what we have to do, take your steel straw that you have, has all the markings for your oil. You're gonna stick it right on this syringe. Just pop that on there, pop that on the silicone tube. Just like that, just barely put it on there, just enough so it's on there. Then what we can do is take this aluminum billet cap stopper, and then you just unscrew that all the way, and then you stick the steel straw through there. You might have to take that all the way out. There it goes. And then those numbers on there is the oil amount in millimeters. So we're gonna set these forks to 105. So we're just gonna unscrew this as much as we can. And then we're gonna slide it all the way up to 105. And if, right, there we go. Just up a little bit, right there. So now you just wanna hold it right where you want it, and then tighten this bolt down. And that is how you assemble the oil measure. So now what we're gonna do is put oil in our fork, and then we can measure it up. So I have Maxima fork oil. I got the 10 just because I wanted a little bit thicker. So yeah, now what we're gonna do, you want your fork to be completely collapsed, and you want the spring to be out when you put this oil in. So now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna fill it up, just pour it in there, pour a good amount in there until you think it's good, and then we'll just take our fork oil measure and just, if we have too much, it'll just suck all the remaining out. If there's not enough, no oil will come out. So to measure out the oil, what you do is you just stick that right down in there, hold it flush, and then just pull your syringe out. And you can see a bunch of oil coming through. So that means it's too high, so we're just going to keep doing that until no more oil comes up, and that will be the right oil amount. So now there's no oil coming out, so you know you have your fork set the right fork oil setting. So now we can just put that on the table, and then we can reassemble our fork spring. One thing we do before we reassemble, we have to bleed it out. So what you're going to do is just pump this arm a little bit, just make it go up and down. Do that a couple times until you feel no air bubbles, and then you're good. So now what we have to do is we're just gonna lift this all the way up, and we're gonna slide our spring slide our spring down. Just gonna pull that back up. So now we're ready to screw on the fork cap. So we're just gonna try not to let this fall down, which it was. Slide that, now I can press the spring, grab that, and then stick that down in there, and then you can screw that on. So what you have to do after you get the fork filled with oil, you just lift this arm up and then put the spring on, and then you just compress the spring and screw the fork cap back on. So I just have it screwed on, and I'm gonna tighten that. Just gonna grab a wrench and tighten it down, make it snug, and then you can just slide your fork tube back up and tighten the fork cap. All right, so we got that all tightened down. So you just slide your fork tube up, and then you're gonna grab the cap and just slowly tighten it down. And then you will need to grab your torque wrench and torque that down to 15 foot-pounds of torque, and then this fork is done.